Imagine for a second that you were trying to start a pharmaceutical company from scratch.
Oh, wow. Good luck with that.
Right. And not just anywhere, but in India. You're stepping into this hyper-competitive arena with over 10,000 active pharmaceutical manufacturers.
Yeah, it's intensely crowded.
Exactly. And you aren't backed by, a bottomless pit of venture capital. You don't have billions of dollars in the bank to fund some massive research and development lab.
Which you usually need.
Right. And you are going up against these massive, entrenched, multinational giants who have controlled the market for decades. But you have one radical idea.
Which, honestly, is usually the preamble to a business school case study where the company just spectacularly fails within its first 18 months.
It really is.
I mean, the pharmaceutical industry is so incredibly capital intensive, and the barriers to entry are practically designed to crush underfunded upstarts.
Yet we are looking at a story where the upstart didn't just survive. They thrived to an almost unbelievable degree.
Welcome to today's Deep Dive. I'm your host.
And I'll be your resident expert today.
And today our mission is to unpack a really fascinating academic case study by Dr. Bandaru's Srinivasa Rao. He tracked the absolute meteoric rise of Lloyd Healthcare Private Limited.
It's an incredible timeline.
It really is. Founded by a mere 12 people in 2011, and they managed to scale into a massive enterprise. Today, they're pulling in over Rs 355 crore in revenue with nearly 1,700 employees.
Yeah, the scale-up is just wild.
And the most compelling part of Dr. Rao's research is the revelation that Lloyd did this simply by rewriting the rules of corporate culture, like treating their field force as their absolute greatest asset.
Right.
So to understand the mechanics of this underdog story, we have to look at the founder's mindset before day one.
We really do. We have to travel back to the summer of 2011 to the city of Vijayawada in Andhra Pradesh.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So the founder, Shri Narayana Rao Vikram, he was not your typical detached executive who spent his career in corner offices just, looking at spreadsheets.
Right.
He was a former medical representative. He spent years traversing the dusty lanes of Andhra Pradesh, literally carrying a heavy sample bag from clinic to clinic, talking directly to cardiologists and diabetologists.
So he really knew the ground reality.
Intimately. That ground-level experience gave him a front-row seat to the dark side of the large incumbent pharma companies.
You mean those massive commercial machines where the frontline workers are often treated as, completely expendable?
Expendable is exactly the operative word. Vikram saw firsthand the bureaucratic apathy directed toward the field force.
Yeah.
Ground-level sales reps were being handed these impossible quotas by managers who, never even left the air-conditioned headquarters.
Oh, that's the worst.
Right. He witnessed ethical shortcuts being pushed just to hit quarterly targets. And if a rep burned out from the stress or, say, refused to compromise their integrity, the company just churned them out and hired a fresh graduate the next day. So Vikram fundamentally believed that this toxic environment was a massive vulnerability for these giants. He decided to build a company where the field force was actually respected, where human capital was the primary competitive asset.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the way he actually started the company flips the traditional startup narrative totally on its head.
It really does.
The case study frames his approach using Sarasvathi's effectuation theory. Normally, when a founder wants to disrupt an industry, they lean heavily on causal logic.
Right.
They declare this massive predetermined goal like, I'm going to build $1 billion pharma company, and then they work backward. They write a 50-page business plan, obsess over the resources they lack, and try to just force the world to fit their vision.
Yeah, causal logic.
It's like deciding you're going to win a Formula One race and refusing to start until you've raised $50 million to build the perfect cutting-edge car.
Which takes forever if it ever happens. While effectual reasoning is looking at the beat-up Honda Civic currently sitting in your driveway.
I love that analogy.
Yeah, you realize you intimately know every single back alley and shortcut in the city, and deciding to win the race by just out-navigating the giant trucks, you don't start with a grand master plan of market dominance.
Right.
You start by looking at the means you already have. You ask, who am I, what do I know, and whom do I know?
And Vikram knew physician psychology in Tier 2 Indian cities better than anyone. He knew the daily struggles of the medical reps.
Yeah.
And he had a network of co-directors with 2 decades of deep pharma experience.
Exactly. He didn't waste time lamenting the massive factories or the huge R&D budgets he didn't have. He built a strategy entirely around the specific localized knowledge and the highly experienced people he already possessed.
This is so smart.
And starting with what they knew allowed them to avoid the classic trap of trying to be everything to everyone. They didn't manufacture over-the-counter pain relievers or seasonal cough syrups.
Right, they targeted a matter of literal life and death, India's twin epidemic of cardiovascular disease and diabetes.
Which is a massive, massive issue.
The epidemiological data and the sources is genuinely harrowing. Like, India accounts for 1/5 of all cardiovascular deaths globally.
Wow.
Yeah, the global average death rate for cardiovascular disease is 235 per 100,000 people. In India, it spikes to 272 per 100,000.
That's a huge jump.
And the diabetes statistics are even more severe. With 101 million individuals diagnosed, India has actually overtaken China as the diabetic capital of the world.
And the clinical reality of those numbers is staggering, especially when you consider the comorbidity. Patients frequently suffer from both high blood pressure and diabetes simultaneously, creating this compounding, lifelong crisis.
Right, because these are chronic conditions.
Exactly. A patient doesn't take a pill for 5 days to clear an infection and never think about it again. These therapies require long-term adherence.
Yeah.
A patient might be on a specific blood pressure medication for 3 decades. That requires deep, ongoing trust between the patient, the prescribing doctor, and the brand of the medication.
Which introduces an interesting tension here. Because the academic framework applied in this study is Kim and Mawborn's blue ocean strategy.
Right. Red oceans versus blue oceans.
Exactly. The theory goes that a red ocean is a market where everyone is fiercely competing for the same customers, turning the water red with the blood of competition. A blue ocean is when a company creates an uncontested market space by finding a new audience or delivering value in a totally new way.
Correct.
But I have to push back on applying that here. I'm looking at the Indian cardio-diabetic market, and it is dominated by absolute leviathans.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, companies like Sun Pharma, Cipla, and Torrent Pharmaceuticals have revenues well over Rs for 5,000 crore. They're household names with literal armies of sales reps. Stepping into the cardio-diabetic space seems like diving into the reddest, most blood-soaked ocean imaginable.
Well, that skepticism is entirely warranted if we are only looking at the chemical compounds being sold. The molecules Lloyd Healthcare brought to market, drugs like metoprolol for heart conditions or rosuvastatin for cholesterol, are generic. They are off-patent commodities manufactured by dozens of different companies.
Right.
The blue ocean for Lloyd wasn't a miraculous new patented medicine. Their blue ocean was a combination of geography and their relational approach to the physicians.
So you're saying the medicine was identical, but the delivery mechanism, like the human interaction wrapped around the medicine, was the actual innovation.
Precisely. Historically, the large multinational and massive domestic pharma companies focused their highly trained elite sales reps on the sprawling metropolitan hospitals in Mumbai, Delhi, or Bangalore.
Big hubs.
Right. They viewed Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities in places like Andhra Pradesh and Telangana as secondary priorities. They would often just delegate those smaller cities to third-party distributors. And a distributor's only goal is to move boxes of pills, you know? They aren't incentivized to sit down, understand a local doctor's specific patient demographic, or build long-term clinical trust.
They just drop off the samples, ask for the quota, and leave.
Exactly. Which leaves the physicians in those Tier 2 cities feeling totally neglected and undervalued by the big brands. Lloyd Healthcare saw this massive blind spot.
They saw an opening.
Right. They realized they didn't need to fight a ground war in the major metropolises. They went directly to these underserved physicians. And crucially, they didn't send third-party distributors.
Who did they send?
They sent highly motivated, deeply respectful, and ethically trained medical representatives who were actually coached to listen.
Wow.
By serving prescribers who felt ignored by the giant incumbents, Lloyd cultivated an intense, localized loyalty. They essentially carved out a blue ocean of human relationships within a red ocean of generic products.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Finding a geographic niche is a smart logistical move, but it completely falls apart if you send in the exact same toxic, high-pressure sales reps that the big companies use.
Oh, 100%. It wouldn't work at all.
Right. To actually win over those Tier 2 doctors, Vikram had to build an entirely different kind of field force, which brings us back to the core values of the company.
The big four.
Yes, transparency, role modeling, ethics, and politeness. Now, I read those 4 words in the case study, and my initial reaction was cynicism.
Of course.
I mean, every mega corporation has those exact buzzwords printed on a glossy poster in the break room, usually next to a picture of someone climbing a mountain, while the actual management culture is completely ruthless.
The cynical reaction is the standard one because we are so conditioned to view corporate values as just marketing fluff. But Dr. Rao's case study demonstrates that at Lloyd, these values functioned as hard operational protocols rooted in transformational leadership.
How so?
Let's look at the mechanics of politeness. In a typical cutthroat sales environment, disagreement is viewed as insubordination.
Right, do what you're told.
But at Lloyd, politeness translates to genuinely valuing divergent views. If a junior rep tells a manager that a specific promotional strategy won't work in a rural clinic, the manager is expected to actually listen and consult, rather than just yelling at the rep to hit their numbers.
That's huge. And I imagine role modeling is the direct antidote to the bureaucratic apathy Vikram experienced. It's one thing to put ethics on a poster. It's another thing to actually practice the senior as coach mentality the sources describe.
The senior as coach model is perhaps their most potent weapon. Because the founders were former medical reps, they possess what organizational psychologists call experiential congruence.
Experiential congruence.
Okay.
Basically, when a regional manager at Lloyd instructs a young field rep on how to handle a skeptical doctor who is pushing back on a drug's efficacy, the rep knows the manager isn't just reading from a sanitized corporate handbook.
That manager has sweat through that exact same uncomfortable conversation on the same dusty roads. The leadership walks the talk by riding along on clinic visits, not to micromanage, but to actively demonstrate how to build ethical trust with the physician.
We can map this directly onto Barney's resource-based view, or RBV.
Oh, absolutely.
Because to have a sustained competitive advantage, a business needs a resource that meets the VRON criteria. It must be valuable, rare, inimitable, and non-substitutable. Usually we think of a business moat as a billion-dollar patent on a new biological drug or exclusive access to a rare raw material.
Yeah, the classic hard assets.
But in the generic pharma space, the factories are highly replicable. The chemical formulas are public knowledge. Lloyd's true competitive advantage, their impenetrable moat, is their human capital.
A deeply embedded culture of trust and psychological safety is incredibly difficult to imitate. If a massive incumbent suddenly noticed Lloyd's success in these Tier 2 markets and decided to crush them, they couldn't do it just by opening their checkbook. You can buy a manufacturing plant overnight. You cannot buy a people-first culture overnight. To replicate Lloyd's strategy, a massive competitor would have to fire their toxic middle managers, completely overhaul how they evaluate performance, and force their elite executives to start acting like empathetic coaches.
Which is never going to happen.
No.
The organizational inertia alone makes that impossible. A massive bureaucracy will always protect its own hierarchy before it fundamentally rewrites its soul. Treating people well, demanding ethical behavior, and fostering genuine politeness isn't soft HR. It acts as a literal structural barrier to entry for their fiercest competitors.
And the financial milestones validate that strategy in a spectacular way.
The numbers are crazy.
They hit Rs 200 crore in revenue within its first 10 years. The case study notes that achieving this chronological speed organically, without massive venture capital injections artificially inflating growth, is an extreme outlier in the pharmaceutical sector. By the 2024 to 2025 financial year, they reached Rs 355 crore, employing 1,689 people across multiple states. Their impact was recognized industry-wide when they won the CMS Healthcare Excellence Award for being the fastest-growing cardio-diabetic company in India.
So what does this all mean for their future? Because they are no longer a small, scrappy underdog operating out of a single city.
Not at all.
The sources reveal a new, incredibly aggressive declared goal. They want to become a Rs 1,000 crore enterprise by the year 2030.
We're seeing the deployment of Hamel and Prahalad's concept of strategic intent. A strategic intent isn't a vague mission statement like, we strive to be the best.
Right.
It is a massive, long-horizon, quantifiable goal that demands the entire organization stretch beyond its current capabilities. Declaring a target of Rs 1,000 crore by 2030 gives all 1,700 employees absolute clarity on what mountain they're climbing. It forces leadership to figure out how to deploy resources on a much grander scale.
Well, I have to interject here because this is where I see massive alarm bells going off.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Going from 355 crore to 1,000 crore in that time frame requires roughly 23% annual growth every single year, relentlessly. Doesn't that level of financial pressure fundamentally threaten the very culture that got them here?
It's a huge risk.
When you demand 23% growth, strategic intent starts to sound suspiciously like the exact same aggressive sales quotas that force the ethical shortcuts Vikram founded the company to escape.
That is the ultimate tension of this case study. The threats at this stage of growth are existential. First, you have the external pressure of regulatory intensification.
Okay.
The Central Drug Standard Control Organization, the CDSCO, is systematically tightening the rules surrounding pharmaceutical marketing. They are cracking down on how companies interact with doctors.
Meaning growth can no longer rely on aggressive promotional expenditures.
Exactly. It must rely entirely on clinical trust and product quality. Lloyd's Ethical Foundation provides a strong defensive posture here, but maintaining flawless compliance across a massive, rapidly expanding sales force is a severe logistical burden.
And then there is the unavoidable challenge of internationalization.
Yes.
If they are serious about becoming our Rs 1,000 crore Indian pharma multinational, they cannot rely solely on Tier 2 cities in India forever. They have to expand their footprint globally.
Which is a whole different beast.
Right. That means navigating the labyrinth of the US FDA or the European Medicines Agency. It means establishing foreign distribution networks and potentially acquiring global manufacturing facilities, which requires capital and international expertise they may not possess organically.
Yet, the most insidious threat to their 2030 goal isn't regulatory or financial. It is anthropological. It comes down to Dunbar's number.
Anthropologist Robin Dunbar.
Yes. He famously theorized that human beings possess the cognitive capacity to maintain a maximum of about 150 stable social relationships.
Only 150.
Right. Beyond that number, our brains simply cannot keep track of everyone on a deeply personal level. When Lloyd Healthcare had 12 employees or even 50, Vikram and the founding co-directors could personally mentor every single person.
They actually knew them.
Exactly. The culture was transmitted daily through direct eye contact, shared meals, and personal observation.
But today they have nearly 1,700 employees spread across 13 states. You can't personally mentor 1,700 people. You become a signature on a company-wide email.
Exactly the problem. When an organization scales past Dunbar's number, it can no longer rely on personal, tribal bonds to maintain its values. It has to rely on systems, management layers, and formalized human resource structures.
Which introduces friction.
Yes. Every time you add a new layer of middle management to handle the growth, you risk diluting the founding values. If Lloyd hires a new district manager in a remote state, how does Vikram ensure that manager is actually embodying the senior as coach mentality, rather than reverting to the dictatorial, quota-obsessed management style they learned at a rival company?
They are essentially fighting the gravity of their own scale. If they want to become a global multinational by 2030, they run the very real risk of morphing into the exact same bureaucratic cog in the machine giant that they set out to destroy.
It is the central paradox of their ambition. The intensely personal, highly ethical culture that propelled them to Rs 355 crore is now under immense strain from the sheer weight of their expansion.
Yeah.
They are attempting to prove to the entire business world that you can build a massive, highly profitable multinational enterprise without sacrificing your humanity or treating your frontline workers like expendable tools.
If they pull it off, it's revolutionary.
If they manage to navigate this and hit that 1,000 crore mark while keeping their values intact, they will have written a new blueprint for the pharmaceutical industry. But if they succumb to the pressure, they will become another cautionary tale of a brilliant startup that eventually lost its soul in the pursuit of revenue.
It is a phenomenal narrative of corporate rebellion. We started this deep dive looking at the seemingly impossible task of building a company in a market teeming with 10,000 aggressive competitors.
And they did it.
And the takeaway cuts through all the complex academic frameworks. The journey of Lloyd Healthcare proves that treating your people with dignity, demanding uncompromising ethics, and fostering genuine politeness isn't some soft, feel-good initiative. It is a highly effective, razor-sharp competitive strategy.
It forces us to remember that beneath the generic molecules, the supply chains, and the regulatory filings, a company is ultimately just a collection of people.
Yeah.
How a leadership team treats those people directly dictates how those people will treat the market, the doctors, and ultimately the patients.
So I want you, listening right now, to evaluate your own workplace or the teams you manage. Think about the stated values of your organization. Are they just bullet points in an onboarding manual that everyone ignores by day 2, or are they practically embedded in your daily operations?
It's a tough question to answer, honestly.
It is. Does your leadership actually get in the trenches and practice a senior as coach model, Or are they managing from a sanitized spreadsheet on the top floor?
The gap between declaring a culture and functionally living it is where most companies fail.
Which leaves us with one final lingering thought for you to mull over today. Consider the concept of scale in any organization, whether it's a massive corporation, a nonprofit, or even a local community group.
Okay.
Is there an absolute, unavoidable ceiling on how large a collective can grow before its deeply personal, values-based culture inevitably fractures into cold bureaucracy? When you start from scratch with a radical human-centric idea and you finally reach the very top of the mountain, is it truly possible to stay the same?
That is the ultimate test of any founder's vision.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.